Hi everybody, Jane here, and I am reviewing The Trauma Cleaner. And this book is a nonfiction book about a lady named Sandra who later in life opens up this heavy duty cleaning service. So she cleans for crime scenes, she cleans for hoarders. I mean, she's the person you call in when disaster has struck and things are so messy that, like, you can't just clean it up yourself. Um, it is written by Sarah Krasnostein, and she brings a lot of her own story into it as well, I felt like. So she's not as journalistic as maybe I would have liked to have seen, but she's kind of an interesting character in it, as she follows Sandra around and learns a little bit about the trauma cleaning business. So this book for me was about a 3 out of 5. I really had some issues with this book, and part of it was honestly that I didn't read the front flap before I picked it up. So I just was going on basically what was said on the cover and the look on the cover, and I didn't really know everything the book was about. So I figured it was going to be like somebody who cleans up traumas, and that was going to be it. Um, but in actuality, the majority of the book is really about Sandra's life. Um, Sandra is transgendered, and so when she was in her 20s, she changed from a boy into a woman. And that didn't bother me, but I just wasn't prepared for it as I was picking it up. And it wasn't really something I was terribly interested in. I was excited about the trauma cleaning part of things, but in the book, there wasn't nearly as much of that as I would have liked. And the other thing is, honestly, mostly she was cleaning hoarders. She wasn't doing a lot of actual, like, crime scene trauma cleaning, which is kind of what I was expecting and hoping for. So, yeah, there were a couple things that for me didn't work in this book, and I'll get into a lot more detailed in the spoiler part, but basically, I didn't like Sandra very well. Um, Throughout the story, she's making a lot of decisions that I just had a hard time being supportive of. Like, just, I didn't want to say she was a bad person because she wasn't a bad person, but I feel like the author was trying to make us sympathetic to her plight, and honestly, so much of Sandra's issues are caused by things that she did that had nothing to do, by the way, with the transgendered thing, but just life decisions. And I had a real hard time feeling sympathetic for her. The other thing that was rough for me is I felt like the narrator of the story, the journalist who was writing this biography, brought in way too much of her own issues and trauma. Like, this book is very appropriately the trauma cleaner, but I felt like it was personal trauma from everybody that was being cleaned up and not any kind of literal trauma. Because a lot of the customers that we meet of Sandra's are hoarders, and there's just not, everybody has these issues, and it really made it very difficult to read. And I finished the book, and it wasn't a bad read, but I didn't love it. So I'm going to go into the spoiler part now, so if you haven't read the book and want to read that first, go ahead and click off now. Otherwise, we're about to have some spoilers. So Sandra, um, I had a hard time with her. She starts out as a boy named Peter, and that we're basically told that's not his real name, but Sandra didn't want to reveal her real name to us. And another thing you learn really quickly is that Sandra is kind of an unreliable narrator. There's a lot of stuff that she says that, the person who's writing the book says I can't verify. I don't really know if this is true or this time frame, or Sandra wasn't sure, so I'm kind of like extrapolating information. And I felt like there were a lot of things that were told about her early life that maybe she didn't remember correctly. Like, they just seemed kind of far off to me. So Peter had a really, really rough childhood. He was adopted, when he was a baby because his adoptive parents had just lost a child and his mom had been told she couldn't have any more kids, so they go out and adopt this baby. Well, then she does have more kids, and so Peter kind of gets pushed off to the side initially and ultimately like gets thrown out of the house and starved and beaten and just all this stuff. And I kind of wondered about how accurate some of the things were because it just seems so over the top. I'm not saying stuff like that doesn't happen, but he's going to a school and you'd think that somebody would notice, or like he's got all these family members living around and you would just think somebody would intervene. But maybe not. But I wasn't really sure about Peter's past. The kid's past. How much of that was accurate, and also, it is just Sandra's version of what happened. When was she kicked out? Was there a reason? Because she'd been sharing a room with her brothers, and she's transgendered and she's also bisexual. And so I felt like maybe something happened with the brothers that she didn't remember, and that's why she got kicked out. Because like she got locked out of the house after 4:30 in the afternoon. She was not allowed to be in the house, and I just I thought it was kind of weird. And the other thing is, like, as you get further through, especially by the end, you realize that Sandra has some serious mental health issues. Like, she can't form relationships very well. She's very friendly up front, but she's not a person who, like, she's gonna go to people when they have trouble. She's not a very forgiving person. If you like hurt her once, she's done with you. And I didn't think, I thought that made it so I trusted her narrative of things a little less. So anyway, she goes from this to getting married at like 19 to a girl, Linda. And again, Peter's still a man at this point. And again, all this bad stuff's happened in his childhood, but his parents still come to his first child's christening and all this stuff, and there's pictures of it in the book. And anyway, he's trying to live a normal life even though he knows he's a girl. After the birth of his second child, he basically is like, okay, I'm not being true to myself. I need to live life as a woman. So at this point, he basically tells his wife, I'm going to go be a man, or I'm going to stop being a man, I'm going to go be a woman, and I'm leaving. And Sandra says that initially she fought for custody of the kids, but she didn't really do much. She was just like, oh, well, they weren't going to give them to me. And so instead of, well, let me back up there. She's told by the wife, Linda, that she can still see the kids, but she has to come as a he. Because the kids are really little and it would be confusing for dad to show up in a dress. And, with boobs and stuff. So, and he basically says to her, well, I'm not going to do that. So he just walks out of their life. He doesn't, after that point, he doesn't have any contact with kids. He doesn't pay child support. And like at the very, 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 very end of the book, he does reconnect with his son, or, well, Sandra reconnects with her son. But then at that point, it's a very small thing, and she even says, I'm not leaving him anything in my will, it's all going to charity, he'll be fine. My kid will be fine, it's okay. I didn't pay child support their whole life. They were raised by a single mom with 2 kids who was like struggling, and Linda didn't ask for any of this. But, Sandra had to go off and do her own thing. So anyway, that bothered me. I'm a parent and I can't imagine just walking out of my kid's life and not caring what happened to them. And like she sees Linda a couple times throughout the narrative, and like she never is like, oh my gosh, how are my kids? She's just like, oh, that's nice. And she doesn't seem to care. And that really bothered me. So that was one issue I had with Sandra. Another issue I had with Sandra is she becomes a prostitute. And I didn't have a problem with that necessarily, but like, basically, you're given the impression initially, like, oh, that's the only thing she could do. That's the only thing, because she's transgender, that she can do is just be a prostitute. But then you're also told, well, she got this job as a shop clerk or something, and it just didn't pay as well as prostitution. And I had a lot of trouble with the sympathy there, because she had some partying issues. And so much bad stuff happens to her because of her lifestyle choices. Like, Not the fact that she was a man and once is now a woman, but because she's partying, she's hanging with the wrong crowd, she's, around people who are using drugs and she's using drugs too. And then she decides to be a prostitute because it pays better than, a day job. So then, later on, she gets married to this guy. And like the whole time she's married to him, she's cheating on him with this other guy. And I just could not really be sympathetic to Sandra. Like, I didn't have a problem. I didn't have a problem with the fact that it was her story, but I didn't care for her. And she didn't do anything to make me be like, yes, I want to know your story. Like, it wasn't like, you're an amazing business person, here's the things you did that got you to this point. It was very much focused on her being transgendered, but, then she's also like, oh, all this terrible traumatic stuff happened to me. But a lot of it was kind of her own doing. Like, she put herself in really bad, dangerous situations. Like, she gets raped as a prostitute. And, that's not okay. I'm not saying it's okay, but if you had just taken the job that you could have had, maybe that wouldn't have happened to you. So anyway, I wasn't as sympathetic to Sandra as I could have been. And this book it really bothered me on a lot of levels. So I can't really recommend it. I'm going to hold it up one more time so you can see the pretty cover. If you're looking for a book about crime scene cleanup, this is not it. If you're looking for a book about an entrepreneurial woman or an entrepreneurial transgendered woman, this isn't really it. This is the story of Sandra. A part of it is about her, journey to become a woman from a man, but even that was a fairly small part of the book. It's mostly about this woman making really bad life choices. And, she does end up having her business, which is great, but then she's also dying. And she's really good at what she does. She's empathetic to the people who have gone through all this trauma, and she is really good at cleaning, and she is really like a go-getter about things, but I just didn't think she was like a person that I could really connect to, and I didn't think she was a person that I could be like, oh, as an entrepreneur, I couldn't be like looking up to her because I just couldn't. I didn't like her very much. So if you're looking for a book about somebody making really bad choices, this, is fairly entertaining. Like I said, I'm giving it a 3 out of 5. It wasn't terrible. It just was not my cup of tea at all. Alright guys, you know what to do. If you enjoyed the video, please like. If you've read it and have a different opinion, I'd love to hear your comments. Subscribe for more content. Alright guys, thanks, bye.